done. Arbakanam of poor boys who were very inexperienced. Bhiksor Marga, the path of a beggar or mendicant. Sannyasi. Pradarsitaha, shown. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Pradapati Daksha said, Alas, Narad Muni, you wear the dress of a saintly person, but you are not actually a saint. Indeed, although I am now in Grihastha life, I am a saintly person. By showing my sons the path of renunciation, you have done me an abominable injustice. Purport by Srila Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Sanyasire alpa chidra sarva loke gaya. PC Madhyalila 1251. In society, one will find many sannyasis, vanaprasthas, grihastas, and brahmacharis. But if all of them properly live in accordance with their duties, they are understood to be sadhus. Prajapati Daksha was certainly a sadhu because he had executed such great austerities that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, had appeared before him. Nevertheless, he had a fault-finding mentality. He improperly thought Narad Muni to be asadhu or non-saintly because Narad had foiled his intentions. Desiring to train his sons to become grihastas, fully equipped with knowledge, Daksha had sent them to execute austerities by Narayana Saras. Narad Muni, however, taking advantage of their highly elevated position in austerity, instructed them to become Vaishnavas in the renounced order. This is the duty of Narad Muni and his followers. They must show everyone the path of renouncing this material world and returning home back to Godhead. Prajapati Daksha, however, could not see the exaltedness of the duties Narad Muni performed in relation to his sons. Unable to appreciate Narad Muni's behavior, Daksha accused Narada of being asadhu. The word Bhikshur Marga, the path of the renounced order, are very significant in this regard. A sannyasi is called Tridandi Bhikshu because his duty is to beg alms from the homes of grihastas. And to give the grihastas spiritual instructions. Okay. Sorry, thanks. Yeah. A sannyasi is allowed to beg door to door. Oh, well, let's go there. A sannyasi is called Tridandi Bhikshu because his duty is to beg alms. Okay, now we have something. Thank you.
Can you have small mic?
No, it won't fit in this computer. The other computer is. Sannyasi is called Tridandi Bhikshu because his duty is to beg alms from the homes of grihastas and to give grihastas spiritual instructions. The sannyasi is allowed to beg from door to door, but a grihasta cannot do so. Grihastas may earn their living according to the 4 divisions of spiritual life. A Brahmin grihasta may earn his livelihood by becoming a learned scholar and teaching people in general how to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He may also assume the duty of worship himself. Therefore, it is said that only Brahmanas may engage in deity worship, and they may accept as prasad whatever people offer the deity. Although a Brahmana may sometimes accept charity, it is not for his personal maintenance, but for the worship of the deity. Thus, a Brahmana does not stock anything for his future use. Similarly, Kshatriyas may collect taxes from the citizens, and they must also protect the citizens, enforce rules and regulations, and maintain law and order. Vaishyas should earn their livelihood through agriculture and cow protection, and Sudras should maintain their livelihood by serving the three higher classes. Unless one becomes a Brahmana, one cannot take sannyas. Sannyasis and brahmacharis may beg alms door to door, but a grihastha cannot. Prajapati Daksha condemned Narad Muni because Narad, a brahmachari who could beg from door to door, had made sannyasis of Daksha's sons, who were being trained to be grihasthas. Daksha was extremely angry at Narad because he thought that Narad had done him a great injustice. According to Daksha's opinion, Narad Muni had misled Daksha's inexperienced sons, Asarvakari Arbhakanam. Daksha regarded his sons as innocent boys who had been misled when Narad showed them the renounced order of life. Because of all these considerations, Prajapati Daksha charged that Narad Muni was asadhu and should not have adopted the dress of a sadhu. Sometimes a saintly person is misunderstood by grihastas, especially when he instructs their young sons to accept Krishna consciousness. Generally, a grihasta thinks that unless one enters grihasta life, he cannot properly enter the renounced order. If a young man immediately adopts the path of the renounced order in accordance with the instructions of Narad, or a member of his disciplic succession, his parents become very angry. The same phenomena is occurring in our Krishna consciousness movement because we are instructing all the young boys in the Western countries to follow the path of renunciation. We allow Grihastha life, but a Grihastha also follows the path of renunciation. Even a Grihastha has to give up so many bad habits that his parents think his life has been practically destroyed. We allow no meat eating, no illicit, no gambling, and no intoxication. And consequently, the parents wonder how, if there are so many no's, one's life can be positive. In the Western countries especially, these four prohibited activities practically constitute the life and soul of the modern population. The parents sometimes dislike our movement, just as Prajapati Daksha disliked the activities of Narad and accused Narad of dishonesty. Nevertheless, although parents may be angry at us, we must perform our duty without hesitation because we are in the disciplic succession from Narad Muni. People addicted to householder life wonder how one can give up the enjoyment of Grihastha life, which is a concession for sex enjoyment, simply to become a mendicant of Krishna consciousness. They do not know that the householder's concession for sex life cannot be regulated unless one accepts the life of a mendicant. The Vedic civilization therefore enjoins that at the end of one's 50th year, one must give up household life. This is compulsory. However, because modern civilization is misled, householders want to remain in family life until death, and therefore they are suffering. In such cases, the disciples of Narad Muni advise all the members of the younger generation to join the Krishna consciousness movement immediately. There is nothing wrong. Nanjana Shalakaya Chakshurmithamyana Tasmai Shri Gurube Namaha Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhurevacha Patita Nama Pavanabhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasti Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So what to say? The entire Srimad Bhagavatam is condensed and packed into this purport, Prabhupada's purport. So many amazing things. Of course, we can see that, Daksha is definitely very bewildered, even though he is definitely such a nice devotee. He has performed so many austerities that, of course, in today's age, you and I will not be able to execute. Prabhupada is mentioning here that he even had the darshan of Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu had appeared personally in front of him. So imagine what an exalted personality that Krishna himself had appeared in front of him. But nevertheless, of course, one of his main weaknesses was this fault-finding mentality. And I think, all of us can relate to this, having, this tendency to find fault in others. And we see, some gross, exaggerated form of fault finding, even from, such a great devotee as Daksha. So from an ordinary perspective, if we relate the sequence of events to ourselves, it seems apparent that, Daksha was rightly, just to the mundane mood and attitude, it seems, Daksha was rightly upset that, here he was trying to do his service, as a progenitor of the world, that he was trying to do his service. And, he had good intentions. He sent his sons to get properly trained, perform austerities. He sent them to a holy place. So it seems like, at face value that, he was doing the proper things. Every grihasta that has children wants them properly trained. And, most parents have a view that their children will, at some point take up grihasta life and have their own children and, raise them in a proper way according to the Vedas, according to the Shastra. And so it seems like that, Daksha had these good intentions. But we can see that, if one is not properly conversant with the Shastra and, with all aspects of the Shastra, then you can leave out, huge chunks or huge sections of the Shastra. So in this case, we see that Daksha, even though, it seems like, he's doing the right thing, trying to get his sons trained, and then, of course, Narad Muni comes and preaches to them and makes sannyasis of them. And so he, of course, gets very, very upset and angry. And somehow or the other, he is pacified by Lord Brahma, we find in previous texts. And then he decides to have 1,000 sons. And then, of course, when Daksha does this again and preaches to them, of course, we pointed out yesterday that, or the other day, that Daksha had sent his sons to the very same holy spot, Narayan Saras, and, wanted them to be elevated in consciousness and be properly trained to be able to execute their grihasta duties. And of course, Narad Muni shows up on the scene, and he sees that they very properly situated for going back home, back to Godhead. And so he uses, in one sense, logic and reason, and preaches to them that what is the use of entering this grihasta ashram. And in this way, he is able to convince all these sons of Daksha to become sannyasis and go back home, back to Godhead. So it's not that we have to take away everything, discard everything that Daksha is trying to do. He wanted his sons properly trained so that they can enter the grihasta ashram. So what is being described in the purport, of course, Prabhupada is saying about in society one will find many sannyasis, vanapras, grihastas, and brahmacharis. But if all of them live properly in accordance with their duties, they are understood to be sadhus. So of course, Prabhupada is describing the Varanashram system, where there's different social orders, different spiritual orders, and everybody has their duty according to their social and spiritual orders. So we should study these things very, very scrutinizingly and not leave out aspects, because we can see how, even someone who definitely is so knowledgeable, who has seen the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, can become bewildered. We see there's other examples of, great devotees, demigods becoming bewildered. Lord Brahma, he had become bewildered, about the position of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he had stolen the cowherd boys, and that whole pastime is there. From time to time, Lord Indra had become bewildered. So many great devotees become bewildered. And of course, these examples are there for us to learn and not make the same or similar mistakes. So we see this idea of, performing some tapasya, or, living in holy places, activities being performed in holy places, is a sign of auspiciousness in one sense. We see even to the extent that, the battle of Kurukshetra was held in a holy place. And actually, it's pointed out in the Bhagavad Gita that the fact that it was occurring in such a holy place was a sign of victory for the Pandavas. What were some of the other signs of victory whilst we're in that location right now in Kurukshetra? The conch shell. Yes. Hanuman. Hanuman was on the flag, right? So that was a sign of victory. Yeah. Hanuman was Arjuna's flag. The chariot was donated. Yeah. Krishna, of course, the Supreme Personality of Godhead on the chariot. So yes, these were signs of victory. So, where was I? Signs of victory, holy place. And then, just this whole fault-finding mentality, that Daksha was guilty of. Maybe we can analyze that a little bit and see how we can overcome this fault-finding mentality. So we find that, of course, it seems very natural, of course, in the material world, that, one is always trying to find fault with others. And it's to the point where we're actually addicted, so to speak, of finding fault with others. And we should analyze, why am I doing this? And for what reason am I finding fault with others? And generally, if we analyze, we can see that we're trying to be better than others and trying to put ourselves on a higher position than someone else. And this is, one of the main reasons why we're finding fault. And if we analyze the root cause of why we're, trying to put ourselves up, is that we trying to deny our association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So because, we were envious of Krishna in the spiritual world, we fell down to the material world. And so it is because of this envy in general that we are always trying to find fault with others. And if we should all analyze, are we really addicted to this fault-finding mentality? So that's one consideration. Then another consideration we can try to do is try to analyze what is the payoff by us finding fault in others. And generally we'll see that the payoff seems to be, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel better when I put someone else down. And so if we analyze that further, we see that, by putting someone else down, it just starts to create a miserable consciousness for ourselves. And of course, we need to consider that when someone else hears us fault finding, the other person is also implicated because he's hearing our fault finding. And so in both instances, it starts to poison your own mind and heart and of the other persons who are also hearing this. And so in reality, what we are saying is that it is this poisoning of the heart that is pleasurable, because we are looking for pleasure, right? We are seeking pleasure. And because we are seeking pleasure, we are putting others down and try to make ourselves feel better. And so if we analyze this thread, then we can see that actually, by poisoning ourselves, we are thinking that this is pleasure. And so we can relate that, when one takes intoxication, why do you take intoxication? People are looking for some euphoria, some pleasure. And, they got too many troubles, too many worries, and they're trying to drown these worries and troubles.
What?
And they
The sport while stripping.
And they think that by taking, Nagari, your speaker is on. And they think that by taking, some sort of drugs, that they will be able to forget their miseries and become happy again. But of course, it's so temporary, this fleeting happiness. And that's why people become addicted to taking drugs. So in a similar way, we may have some, inferiority complex. And in this way, we become addicted to putting others down. And finding fault with others. So what should we do? How can we try to remedy this situation of finding fault in others? So one of the things we can do is try to look at our own faults and see, what faults do I have first? And you can put off to a later stage trying to find fault with others. But if you start to analyze in this way, you can find that you have so many faults. And hopefully the long list of faults that you have, by the time you get to the end, trying to criticize somebody else, there'll be a long period of time. Anyway, that's just one strategy. But we should understand, fault finding is very detrimental to our spiritual lives. Prabhupada actually ranks fault finding up with the category of illicit sex life. That's how, heavy the reactions for finding faults with others. And what to speak of fault finding with devotees, advanced devotees like Narad Muni. It's compared, of course, to the mad elephant disease, where, the example is given of the elephant. He goes, takes a clean bath in the river, and then he comes back on the land, and then he starts throwing dirt all over himself. And so, it's considered like mad elephant disease, this finding fault with others. And surely, one will get severe reactions. And we see from the Bhagavatam, there's so many examples of criticizing and, getting severe reactions. We should look at ourselves and see, what faults do I have? Look within and see how to improve yourself. So one exercise Mahatma Prabhu gives is that we can all try to do is make a mental note of how often you find faults with others, both with devotees and non-devotees, because it's very easy to criticize non-devotees, the materialists. This is again our tendency, that we find fault with non-devotees. So sometimes it may even start there with non-devotees, but it's just this mentality of fault finding that we want to get rid of. We understand that the spirit soul in its original form does not have this tendency, but due to association with material nature over so many lifetimes and lifetimes, millions of lifetimes, that this tendency has gradually been nurtured and developed of fault finding. So we can try to see how often we do it, and then see if we can go one day without finding fault with non-devotees and devotees. And then we should gradually extend it. 2 days, 3 days, 1 week, 1 month, without saying anything bad about anyone. And so, it's tricky, of course, because do we call a thief a thief? Technically, yes, a thief is a thief. But why focus, on the thief and his qualities? Let's focus on our own and forget about, listing the qualities of the thief. Because in this way, again, we just get caught up in the cycle of all these negative qualities. So if we start, looking within, so of course, the goal is to try to break this habit of fault finding. And Mahatma Prabhu says, probably some research is there, that if you can do some activity or some habit for 90 days, there's some research, then it will become a habit if you do some activity for 90 days. So let us all try to see if we can, not find fault for 90 days. And in this way, we'll be making some advancement as far as fault finding is concerned. Not being able to, not finding fault with others in our association. How else can we do it? There's other nice exercises we can do. Yeah, these are things, in our everyday life that we should try to practice. So this is Romapad Maharaj. He gave a few nice points where he's saying, of course, let's do the opposite of fault finding. Let's appreciate devotees. So if we start to appreciate devotees, we can find opportunities to express appreciation verbally. Whenever there's opportunities to express it verbally, we can, even publicly, sometimes express these things. Then we can also try to offer heartfelt services to these devotees that, we want to criticize or we have criticized. We can offer heartfelt services to them. Because we understand that, service to the Vaishnavas can soften our own hearts. And of course, we know the famous saying that we want our hearts to become as soft as butter so that Krishna can come and steal it. So, it's only by practice, regular practice, that we can try to imbibe these different qualities. So we are interested neither in criticizing the bad qualities nor praising anyone's mundane good qualities. So that's another level of practice that we can include, that yes, someone may have good mundane qualities, but we're not so interested even in those.
What is mundane qualities?
That, he's an expert manager, that, he's got this material qualification, that he is a good engineer, he's good this, he's good that. So, those are some mundane qualities. Of course, we are more interested in the spiritual qualities of a devotee. So praising these spiritual qualities is something that we can do. So what are the 26 qualities of a devotee? Okay.
A balanced leader.
Okay.
Such a balanced.
So let's go. He is kind to everyone. This is the 26 qualities of a devotee, given in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He is kind to everyone. He does not make anyone his enemy. He is truthful. He is equal to everyone. No one can find any fault in him. He is magnanimous. He is mild. He is always clean. He is without possessions. He works for everyone's benefit. He is very peaceful. He is always surrendered to Krishna. He has no material desires. Okay, it's he and she, right? I'm not discriminating. This is how it's given in scripture. He is peaceful. He is always surrendered to Krishna. He has no material desires. He is very meek. He is steady. He controls his senses. He does not eat more than required. He is not influenced by the Lord's illusory energy. He offers respect to everyone. He does not desire any respect for himself. He is very grave. He is very merciful. He is friendly. He is poetic. He is expert. And he is silent. The 26 qualities. Yeah.
Because it's hard to appreciate someone if you like don't look for those things.
Right.
If I don't remember,
Right.
how can I find them?
So we should make a sign and put it everywhere to remind us that, we should carry some flashcards in our pockets. So yes, this fault finding is definitely very, very detrimental to our spiritual lives, to our Bhakti Lata Bij. And, there's so many quotes by devotees that, we can also use as pointers, as reminders, sutras, mantras. Bhaktisiddhanta said, amend yourself rather than pry into the frailties of others. Radhanath Swami said, fault finding is Maya's very vicious weapon to divert our attention from what we have to do in this life. And that is clean up our own hearts. Fault finding creates a miserable state of consciousness for one who speaks it and for one who hears it. It's tough. It's tough. And so it's, sad when we reflect like this about fault finding and, how often we do it, that why are we wasting our time, It's, in one sense, committing spiritual suicide. Because the challenge is that who are we surrounded with? We're surrounded with devotees. And we don't know, who exactly are these devotees. And so even if we don't know, at least if we can practice, not criticizing devotees, then we'll become more eligible to take up our spiritual life very, very seriously. Yeah, I was reflecting on myself, when am I going to become serious about, dealing with devotees and associating with devotees in a very, very favorable way, favorable to my own spiritual life. And of course, we want to put things off till tomorrow, but, using Mahatma Prabhu's, few exercise guidelines, that if we can try to go one day, well, I'll start with go 1 hour without fault finding. And then gradually, try to build onto this 90-day schedule. At least that can become a habit. Then Prabhupada, of course, in the verse is talking about, people in general taking up this Krishna consciousness movement. Let's see what else was here. And how the younger generation should join this Krishna consciousness movement. There is nothing wrong with this. So he's talking about, parents in general, they're always happy to welcome sadhus to their homes, to feed them, and they, of course, want blessings in return. And, when you get blessings from a sadhu like Narad Muni, that, I bless you to become a renunciant, then, of course, things turn very, very quickly from, inviting sadhus. And so then even the Grihasthas are a little wary of, at least in ISKCON, amongst devotees, that they sometimes are very wary of asking now for blessings because they know what's coming, especially when they have sons. And so one idea I was thinking for Gita Nagari specifically, of course, we have the perpetual manpower shortage. So one program I was thinking to institute, was to encourage, our grihastas, in the surrounding areas, New Jersey, New York. Hopefully they don't ban me from traveling there. But encourage them to, send their children, at least for, 3 months, to come to Gita Nagari and do some service for Radha Damodar. There's no harm in that. We won't make them into sannyasis. They'll just do some cow seva, some Radha Damodar, deity worship seva, and in general, get some training, being in the association of devotees very closely in this way. And, what to speak, Gita Nagari is a holy place, taking advantage of that too can help them so much in their spiritual lives going forward. So maybe after school, after they turn 18, I was thinking to encourage devotees, just come and volunteer for 3 months. Yeah, that's true, exactly. So many benefits can come from there. I don't know if I want to deal with managing that, but so many benefits can come from there. So we see even during Prabhupada's time, so many parents were concerned. I'm thinking of the, example that many of you may be familiar with. Giriraj Maharaj's parents, of course, were very wealthy, and, they were not so happy initially when Giriraj Maharaj had joined the movement and, was traveling extensively in India. One time they made a trip to India with the sole purpose of, bringing Giriraj Maharaj back to the West, back to America. And so, of course, they had a darshan with Srila Prabhupada, and there was this exchange of, your son is very, very intelligent. And so his father was trying to use, different tactics of convincing Srila Prabhupada that, because Prabhupada was so intelligent, that he was able to convince Giriraj Swami to, take up the spiritual life and stay with him. So Prabhupada's view, of course, was that, Giriraj Maharaj can do whatever he wants. And then Prabhupada admitted that, yes, your son must be very intelligent to join us. And so he left it up to him. But of course, his mother was very, very concerned for his health, because when she had previously seen him, he looked a little weaker, so to speak. And by that time, I think Giriraj Maharaj had jaundice, and he had got it even for a second time. So eventually, Giriraj Maharaj, of course, told his parents and Prabhupada that he wanted to stay with them. And so Prabhupada assured her that he will take nice care of Giriraj Maharaj. And, that famous pastime was there where Prabhupada said that he will make sure that Giriraj Swami eats 24 rasgullas every day in order to get his protein content. So later on, Prabhupada actually joked with Tamakrishna Maharaj when he was eventually, when I think Maharaj got it for the second time, jaundice in Bombay, he eventually agreed to send him to the West so he can recover his health. And at that time, nobody knows the context, but Prabhupada joked in one sense with Tamakrishna Maharaj and said, well, you couldn't give him rasgullas every day to eat, so I'm sending him to the West. Karandar will give him rasgullas in America every day to eat. Then there was also the pastime where even Prabhupada met Hirdayananda Maharaj's parents. They were also very concerned, and there was some interaction where, they also wanted to convince him to come back to the West. Giriraj Maharaj, of course, the pastime was that his parents came and they presented to Prabhupada that actually, we want to leave an endowment policy with $1 million in the account for Giriraj Swami. So we want to take him back to America to sign all the documents. But Prabhupada said, "No, you can send us the documents, don't worry. We'll get it signed and send it back." So I'm not sure if that eventually came to fruition, signing those documents. Okay, maybe we can stop there and we can share some questions, thoughts, realizations on how to prevent this fault-finding mood mission that's so detrimental to our own spiritual lives.
I wanted just to share
Very good.
Guru Maharaj.
Mhm.
You were connecting fault finding with the reason for it in one sense that we feel envious.
Mhm.
And Guru Maharaj was saying beautiful thing about envy. He said actually the nature of us being envious, because we think that there is only one who can enjoy, and that has to be me.
Right.
But he said that actually the only person to enjoy is Krishna.
Mhm.
So there is no need to race against each other. There is no need to be thinking, oh, who's gonna, have it better, me or her.
Mhm.
He said, no, it's only Krishna.
Right.
Everyone else is on the same platform.
So we need to practice. So here's another sutra. If you like to find faults, find the faults in fault finding. Spend your time doing that if you want to spend your time. The idea is that, we should analyze, and we say this, but we forget. I mean, I forget every day practically, that we should analyze, our previous day. We've got 24 hours. How did I use it? Because, most times we have this, I have this excuse that, there was not enough time. But if we analyze, I slept for 6 hours. Okay, I slept for 8 hours. So then from 24 hours, there's still 16 hours left. Then what did I do in the 16 hours? So if we do an analysis, on a regular basis, maybe you can't do it daily, but every week at least try to do an analysis, what have I been doing with my time? And then we can see that actually there is time to do so many other things. And yeah.
You were saying that also, and I've heard that before, that we shouldn't really listen to other people finding faults with someone.
Mhm.
So my question would be how to react, because sometimes people talk about those things when they're like, I think that I'm just better. But some people, when they talk about it, they're actually in a fragile state, and telling them like, oh, don't tell me this. It's
Yeah.
like gonna hurt them so badly, and they will feel like, oh, devotees don't support me.
Yeah.
So how to behave then?
Yes, so that's a good question, how to behave when someone is, finding fault with others. So it depends on the relationship that, we have different types of relationships. We have relationships with seniors, with equals, and juniors. So depending on that kind of relationship, if it is, of course, a senior, we should, definitely try to leave the situation immediately. And in one sense, even with friends. But with friends, it might be easier to try to change the conversation around rather than, focusing on this fault finding. Try to, divert the conversation to speak about, okay, what can we do to overcome these things? And, change it in that way so that rather than focusing on listening to the problem, you're focusing on, okay, what is the need and how can we help the situation rather than, hearing the full story and getting the full explanation. And so, of course, juniors, we want to try to guide them that, fault finding has, so many pitfalls in our spiritual journey. Eleanor Roosevelt, what did she say? She said, if you don't have something nice to say about someone, if you don't have something nice to say about someone, sit next to me. So it's in the negative, so it's the word jugglery, but basically she's saying if you have something nice to say about someone, then please sit next to me. So even, we can employ these different mantras and sutras, in the association of devotees. And, the idea is that if a few of us, start speaking in this positive way, then, naturally, everyone else is going to, benefit and learn, how to speak, how to interact with each other. So simple things that we can practice, not get caught up in these things. And of course, the classic thing, of course, is if we generally talking about Krishna, talking about our services, then it's tough sometimes to, wander into these areas of, fault finding. So the idea is, glorifying Krishna, his name, form, qualities, pastimes. We can discuss our struggles with chanting japa. How can I improve? Anything you learned lately that you've implemented in your spiritual life that's really helping you, that, I can implement in my spiritual life. And if we're generally talking about, how I can improve, myself, then that can become the focus rather than, someone else's fault finding. Yeah.
Can you clarify the point about not complimenting devotees on their material qualities? Like I was thinking when you were talking about management, like it's nice to glorify the devotee, like, oh, you're managing so nicely for Krishna, right? Or is it like?
Yeah, it's a tricky situation. I mean, it depends on, the relationship. So generally my understanding is, if we want to glorify someone managing nicely, then, we should be a manager too, to be able to understand these principles. Because if we analyze what is the basis of someone saying this, do they have some either shastric or even material qualifications to be able to assess whether someone is a good manager or not? And if they don't, are they just making small talk by saying these things? So one recommendation is that we've got these 26 qualities of devotees. So why not use one of these things to glorify devotees? And so I'm going to make a small card of this and carry in my pocket. And okay, I got nothing else to talk about. Let's talk about this. Yeah, so I think that's one strategy. The devotees want to share other strategies that has helped us deal with this. I mean, we read so much about the detrimental qualities of finding fault, and because it leads to other things. It leads to one getting angry about things like Daksha. He became angry with Narad Muni, and so one thing leads to the next, and then there's just so many bad qualities that develop from this. So we want to break this cycle and try to just focus on the positives.
How can we break this cycle of Daksha? He said this is the second time. First time he got his head chopped because of that. He couldn't learn his lesson.
So, I mean, it should serve as an example that, imagine for these elevated personalities that it's so difficult. So we can understand that it is a difficult thing. So in one sense, we shouldn't get demotivated, when we find that, okay, yes, it is difficult habit to break, we can take some encouragement that, for great personalities like this. But that's why if we are, reading, hearing Shastra in the association of devotees, then slowly, we can separate from these bad qualities. Because the bad qualities here, in one sense, are showing us that, even advanced devotees, like the example of Bharat Maharaj, he was on the stage of Bhava, yet he fell down. Sometimes we think that, yes, I haven't criticized someone for one day, I'm a very, very advanced devotee. So this is the other side that happens, that we suddenly think that we've become so advanced. So we need to be mindful. I was talking to Nanda Vrindavan the other day, and she was making a nice point that, of course, one thing we want to avoid is offending devotees. So we want to avoid that, again, like the plague, we don't want to offend devotees because it's, in one sense, committing spiritual suicide. But then what about the flip side we were discussing? That how often do I get offended by another devotee? So this is okay, right? I get offended by what you said. No, it's not okay. And it's actually illusion to think that it's okay if I'm saying that I'm offended by another devotee. Yes, that may have happened, but it's more proper that, if someone else observes, senior devotee or, close friend observes and takes offense. But it's not okay for us to be offended in one sense. It takes some deep realization to understand that aspect of making offenses or committing offenses. So, we may think that we're sufficiently advanced, we don't offend other devotees, but then, there's the other side where I get very easily offended. And, we can see there's so many examples of, where one gets offended, and we can even apply it to Daksha, In one sense, he's saying that I'm offended that, you've done this to me, Yeah. So both these qualities, we should try to avoid offending and being offended too. And the being offended is a very tricky one. Any more comments, questions, devotees?
Haribol, Haribol.
Haribol, Haribol.
So
Bolu, Bolu.
I heard, so I know Vaisheshika Prabhu, what he does is, if he hears someone trying to blaspheme, he just goes, he like touches his phone and says, oh, sorry, someone's calling me, I have to go, to like get out of the situation. And then one time I heard Devamrita Swami, he was asking me, he was like thinking that I could take shelter, like shiksha relationship with this devotee. And I started saying, well, I don't know about this devotee. This was many years back. I don't know about this devotee. And as soon as I started, like I was going to pretty much say like the reasons I didn't want to. And it was one of his godbrothers. And immediately he stopped me. He's like, no, 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 no. He like didn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
But then one mundane example, but it's really interesting, is that sometimes we think that, we get together and we think that, criticizing a third party, someone else that's not there, will actually make our relationship with the person we're talking to better. Like they say, if you have a common enemy, it strengthens your bonds. But it's interesting that Stephen Covey in Seven Habits, he says that if you criticize like the third party, someone that's not there, it actually makes the person who you're talking to think less of you, because they start thinking, well, if he's talking about someone else that's not present, maybe when I'm not present, he's going to talk about me.
So yes, wonderful point. Thank you for sharing that. So there's so many angles.
Krishna, Dhruva Maharaj, thank you for your class. Wow, you gave a lot of really good information today. And I really loved how you were like compassionate about Prajapati Daksha's position. Like he was doing what he thought was right, And so sometimes it's that with fault finding, is to sort of try to see the other person's position a little bit, that sort of put yourself in their shoes. It helps to keep third parties out of the conversation, because if I can only talk about what's going on with me rather than point the finger at you, and they say 3-point back at me anyway, then it's probably more likely to make me grow rather than to tear us both down, right? And so that's a helpful thing for me, is just to really think about, why am I finding fault? Like, what's so upsetting to, like, why am I so crazy about this? What's going on with me? And then that's what I need to be working on. And then I thought about when you were talking about the mundane qualities, like not glorifying them, that Krishna says, I'm the ability in man. And so any talent or any quality that any of us have has to come from Krishna. So maybe if we are glorifying in another devotee how they're using those talents. And the other day in class, Taraka Prabhu did it so beautifully with Nagari Krishna. He was like, you have this analytical mind and you just apply it so well to like Shastra in your classes. And it's a beautiful way to glorify qualities in one another and showing how we use them in service and acknowledging that they all are expressions of Krishna. So thank you for your class. You gave me a lot to think about today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and Prabhupada, of course, in his purport here, he is also so nicely encapsulating this Varnashram Dharma. He's saying, that only the Brahmanas may engage in deity worship. They may accept as prasad whatever people offer to the deity. Although a Brahmana may sometimes accept charity, it is not for his personal maintenance. So this is a tricky one that sometimes we need to reflect on. We don't have a rule at Gita Nagari, and I don't think we want to make a rule, but we can all meditate on it. That although a Brahmana may sometimes accept charity, it is not for his personal maintenance, but for the worship of the deity. Thus, a Brahmana does not stack anything for his future use. Similarly, Kshatriyas may collect taxes from the citizens, but they must also protect the citizens, enforce rules and regulations, and maintain law and order. Vaishyas should earn their livelihood through agriculture and cow protection, and Sudras should maintain their livelihood by serving the three higher classes. So we can see, Prabhupada is from time to time, reiterating these things that, sometimes we say, well, why is Prabhupada repeating it again? But we forget so easily that these qualities are needed, for the different ashrams. And in this way, of course, Prabhupada is saying that if all of them live properly in accordance with their duties, they are understood to be sadhus. So, there's no high class, low class, this class, that class. This one is greater. Brahmanas are greater than Sudras, and Sudras are lower than this and that. We shouldn't get into that mentality. It's not for us to decide. And so, of course, this idea, principle, again, is there of doing your duty. And so in Bhagavad Gita, we see that the whole system is there. Okay, you can have it. That, doing your duty, Arjuna was definitely very bewildered, perplexed, because again, he was, feeling this compassion for his family members and didn't want to kill them on the battlefield. And, he eventually wanted, his plan was, he thought he had a brilliant plan. I don't want to partake in the war and, kill so many innocent people, creatures, and let me just renounce and go to the forest. So we see actually that in contrast with the advice given here. Here we're saying, Narad Muni is saying, hey, renounce, go to the forest. And we see in the case of Arjuna, he was recommending the same thing. That just, I don't want any kingdom, nothing. I'm okay. I'll just go to the forest. And so, we see in one sense, it's being frowned on, and the other sense, it's yes. So we see everybody has their duty. Narad Muni has a duty to give spiritual realization, to encourage, us persons in general to be able to go back home, back to Godhead. And we see in the case of Arjuna, Krishna's dictation was that you have to do your duty. Exactly. Do your duty, and your duty as a Kshatriya is to fight. And so, yes, exactly. All of these things, there's different types of renunciation for the different orders. And so that's why Prabhupada is reiterating that the renunciation for Grihastas, Vanaprasthas, Sannyasis is all different. And so if everybody does their duty, everybody is a sadhu. And so we can try to remember that. Okay, anything else, devotees?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Divo.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for a very deep class. That was very, very insightful. So my question relates to the tension in Prabhupada's mission, particularly distributing books, the Bhagavat Marga, and basically establishing facility for devotional service. where the deity is in the center. So mainly the Pancharatrika Vidhi. So basically, Daksha and Narada Muni's disagreement is on that level. So what would you say is the synthesis to help devotees move forward? Because each of us, we have different talents, different proclivities, and as a result, the Diksha Guru will give us different instructions according to what we can surrender our life to. So how do we resolve this tension on a personal level when it comes up, so that we can have a synthesis that is progressive, like we can move forward as a community, as opposed to um, just resolving the issue of like, well, my guru said this, Prabhupada said that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, one of the initial things we need to remember is that there's parallel lines of authority. So, in that situation, we can analyze that both of them are true simultaneously. And so, it's sometimes difficult on a practical level. But if we analyze very, very carefully, this Varnashram system is there. And so, Prabhupada wanted us to use, this Varnashram system as a springboard in one sense to get onto the transcendental platform. So we need to analyze our duty in the different ashrams and, how we can situate ourselves so that we can remain true to our different ashrams. And of course, we're all performing in one sense mixed devotional service. So it requires some analysis, but I think, sitting down as a community of devotees, we can analyze and come up, with a workable situation for time, place, and circumstance. Yes, it's true, all of us have different, propensities, proclivities, but again, we should not lose sight of the goal. So of course, we're in a farm community in one sense, and we have a very, very small community per se. So, I think both things are true, that sometimes it seems like it's very easy to figure out just because of the number of persons concerned. What are we dealing with? 30 people or 40 people? We're not dealing with 1 million people to try to organize Varnashram. So I think, with such a small community, it will, it's not so easy in one sense, but from the perspective of the number of devotees we're dealing with within our community, I think, we can work things out. Of course, being the only working farm in the US has its challenges. Again, we should not lose sight of the goal, what our purpose is. And so if we can try to, include, the propensities of the devotees within this model of Varnashram, in Gita Nagari, then we can have, we can have some success. So it's difficult in one sense for us to decide ourselves, but that's why we have, Guru Maharaj there guiding us as our GVC. Of course, many of us, take shelter from him. So I think Guru Maharaj has a clear idea, of how things can work. And in a similar way, devotees during Prabhupada's time, they also, were establishing the worldwide movement. And they would also come up, with different situations and, then reach out to Srila Prabhupada to try to resolve them. And there was actually this one huge situation where, Ramakrishna Maharaj and the traveling buses, used to go to different temples and take, all the brahmacharis and, go to Grihastha communities and take also the brahmacharis. And so eventually this case was also, forwarded to Srila Prabhupada, how to resolve this. And Prabhupada, initially, he was, just encouraging the competition, between these grihastas and their preaching efforts, and the sannyasis and the brahmacharis and their preaching efforts. And the way I understood the story, the grihastas eventually won. But, it wasn't just a clear-cut reason like that. That, when Prabhupada analyzed the situation, he found that, there was just so much of bickering amongst the devotees on this point. And so we see gradually, eventually, the bus party was disbanded and, trying to bring in a new phase of preaching as well. Because, there was at that point so many grihastas, but also there was so much of divorce and so many other factors influenced the whole situation. So I think we can also reach out to our GBC, to Guru Maharaj, for more guidance and shelter of, how to execute, things that we have challenges with. Anybody else has any thoughts and realizations on Nagari Krishna Prabhu's question?
Thanks, Prabhu.
They ready? Okay. I think they're ready for greeting.